The last few videos have been kind of negative or sad. I want to talk about something awesome, like Guilty Gear. Specifically, all the cool mechanics it has, and trust me, it has a lot. So, for the uninitiated, Guilty Gear is a fighting game series that began in 1998. I would describe it as bold? The go-to example for a crazy, over-the-top fighting game is, well, it's Marvel 2, but Gear's close behind. A main factor in its longevity, besides the great character designs, unique style, awesome music, is the absurd number of mechanics that it has to master. That's not a detriment, because it's all tuned with care for the overall balance. Take Gattlings, for instance. Guilty Gear departs from the usual light, medium, heavy punch and kick formula of 6-button fighters, and even the light, medium, heavy of 3-button fighters. Almost every character uses some kind of weapon, so normal attacks are punch, kick, slash, heavy slash, and dust. Dust is weird, and I won't be talking about it in this video. By simply working from lighter attacks to heavier ones, almost every character can get a basic 3 or 4 hit combo. Unlike links in other fighting games that are more character specific, Gattlings are universal and can be done with any character. I've always felt that this was an easier system to understand because most characters' Gatling combos can be found pretty easily even if you're just mashing. These universal mechanics add both depth and complexity to the game. Everyone has a super meter, which is called tension. Despite what you may think, supers are actually not incredibly common, because there's many other ways to use your meter. The most famous example is Roman canceling. If you don't play fighting games, most actions have some amount of wind down time before you can perform another action. Specifically, strong moves like heavy attacks and specials tend to have more. This is what allows for punishes and mind games between you and your opponent. In Guilty Gear, you can spend 25 to 50% of your meter to perform a Roman cancel and immediately cancel out whatever recovery you were in. In earlier games, this was limited to attacks that you land, even if it was blocked. But starting in 2013's Exard, it was expanded to working at any time. This type of mechanic has the potential to break the balance of punishes and vulnerable states, but the heavy cost means that players only have limited access to it. False Roman cancels in Guilty Gear XX cost half as much, but it only works for certain moves and usually cancels before the strongest part, so you're spending less to get less. The problem with the false Roman cancel was that it was restrictive, unlike the normal version which could be used off of any move. To exacerbate the issue, a lot of these false Roman cancels could only be done in extremely tight windows of time, in some cases a few frames or less. Exard rebalanced the cheaper Roman cancel and called it a yellow RC. In this game, it can be done at any time, after any move, as long as the opponent isn't being hit. This is a genius change because it offers more freedom to the player and opens up new possibilities as a tool you use to preempt your opponent, rather than the red Roman cancels usage while you're already engaged with them. That isn't even everything you can do with your meter. Honestly, that would be enough. The Roman cancel is a multi-purpose mechanic. It can be used to extend your combos or get you out of a bad decision. This comes with the trade-off of losing a lot of tension, which is also what powers one of the main defensive mechanics of the series. In games where push blocking appears, it's a core part of defense. Being able to shove your opponent away while blocking means that developers can allow things like intense pressure strings, because there's a mechanic to counteract it that still requires the blocking opponent to use properly. The difference between a bad and good push block can sometimes be a round-ending reset. More specifically, it allows developers to create characters to fill niches like high-pressure block strings and mix-ups. Guilty Gear's version of this is called Faultless Defense. It's a constant state you can enter, but it comes with the caveat of burning meter every second it's active. Similarly, dead angle attacks are counters you can perform while blocking, and cost 50% tension. What all of these mechanics do is create a tension economy, where the player has to first assess how much meter they have, how much they can gain, and how much they need to do what they want. You're weighing your options between offensive and defensive choices with lots of extra utility to go around. The developers made an interesting and quite bold choice to have tension increase not just by hitting your opponent or taking damage from them, but also by simply walking towards them. Excessively retreating will likewise result in a negative penalty that drains all of your meter instantly. Because tension is so valuable and can be applied in any situation, the threat of losing it encourages both players to interact more and trade blows rather than turtling. Tension also resets at the beginning of each round, which forces both players to work it up again. There's no way to win the first round with full meter, then brute force the second with supers and chip damage. The pressure is always on to build as much tension as possible and use as much as you can while you still have it. While tension resets every round, burst does not. Burst is one of my favorite mechanics in Guilty Gear. It's one of the best examples of a universal defensive ability I can think of. It's a comeback mechanic represented by this bar below your health. Upon activation, you become fully invincible and rise up a short distance, emitting a blast around your character. If your opponent is caught in it, they're sent flying full screen. Both players start with a full gauge, but because it carries over across rounds, you have an interesting decision to make. If it's the first round, your burst could save you from your opponent's winning combo, but now you need to win the round to make it worth it. Otherwise, you're probably going into round 2 at match point and without a burst. At the same time, you can be too conservative and hold onto it for too long. Burst refills passively depending on how much health you have, and increases when you take damage. Successfully landing a burst will automatically refill it to 30%, rewarding players who use it well. Comeback mechanics usually get groans from players. Think about X Factor in Marvel 3 or Breakaway in Mortal Kombat 11. What sets Burst apart, however, is that it isn't a win button or a no fun allowed button. After bursting, you're vulnerable until you hit the ground, and it can be blocked, completely negating it. Bad timing can lead to a catastrophic punish by your opponent. This weakness also means that you can bait a burst, and I regularly get outplayed by people with way more time in this game who know how to do these kinds of combos. Burst baits aren't an incredibly high-level tactic, but it requires enough skill that most players have to respect it when it happens to them. Even top players fall for it.
For this right there, that move, body, damn, I actually blocked that. But then I get hit by that. Yo, Cali burst, let's go.
Yo, let's go.
Cali
Let's go,
burst.
bike in.
SoCal.
In addition, there are several states where you can't burst, namely when you're being hit by a super, being thrown, or stunned. This is yet another way to counter it. Bursts can change the tide of a fight by resetting both players' positions, but it doesn't offer either of them a huge advantage, it just resets the game to neutral. It's powerful, but has counterplay that relies on skill. Both players have access to it, and both of them know when it's in play. Let's say you just got knocked down by your opponent, and you really want to turn the game around. You could burst, but that just relieves pressure. You could super, but that's really risky. There is another option, though, that's fairly unique to Guilty Gear. Throws are performed by hitting forward and heavy slash. Unlike most other fighting games, throws in Guilty Gear are instant, but you basically have to be breathing down your opponent's neck to be in range. Fighting games have a sort of trifecta of options. You attack your opponent. If your opponent attacks you, block. If your opponent blocks, grab. If your opponent grabs, well, that depends on the game. By forcing the player to get so close and hit forward to do a grab, they're putting themselves in a potentially dangerous situation. You can't hold back to block. And if your spacing is off, you can easily get punished. So back to our example. If your opponent is now standing over you, waiting for you to recover, you can do a wake-up grab. This steals the advantage in a way that Burst can't do. As a counter to this, the opponent has to vary their approach when you wake up. That might be a projectile to cover you and force you to block, or a move that makes them throw invincible, or some kind of cross-up. The fact that throw is a universal option that can dramatically shift the advantage means that both players are now working with a range of possibilities when one is knocked down. For instance, I play Slayer. Many of Slayer's combos can easily end in a knockdown, and when that happens, I have a few things to consider. I need to keep wake-up throw in mind so I can approach with forward kick, which lifts him off the ground and makes him throw invincible. Maybe I've already done that, or they're anticipating that move and will just block it, which would leave me vulnerable. So I can do a fake-out version and then do my own grab, or a low. If I'm facing a character with an invincible reversal like Soul or Kai, that move will always beat mine, so I have to keep at a distance or use one of a few options I have to cross up. I could use his command grab, which can't be blocked or broken, but leads to less combo opportunities. Sometimes you can just do this. This one mechanic being so strong, but so reliant on your situation, means that interactions are now shaped on a character-by-character basis and create a diverse set of plans, reactions, and predictions. Guilty Gear has so many mechanics to work with that it can feel overwhelming for a new player. But once they understand how the ecosystem of offensive and defensive options works, the game becomes a rich playground. If you're curious about Guilty Gear and its mechanics, I'd recommend Leon Massey. His channel is about fighting games in general, but he uses Gear as a reference a lot, and has several videos centered around very specific subjects. There's more I could have gone over, like the way it handles mobility, but I don't want to spend 30 hours making a video again. Anyway, I don't really know how to end this video, so Plus R is pretty cheap, and the online is great. So consider picking it up, unless you want to play Cliff or Justice, in which case just don't touch the game. Just play Guilty Gear.